He called me a liability in front of 6 people. My partner, the man I'd saved through crashes, carried through the worst years of this firm, just humiliated me in a hallway. 14 floors above downtown Houston, 10 feet away from me, knowing I could hear every word. 28 years, 6 a.m. site walks, deals held together by my reputation, a firm built from 2 desks and a borrowed fax machine. And he used all of it to call me a liability in front of witnesses. I didn't react. I walked to the elevator, rode down to the lobby, and stepped out onto Travis Street alone. That was Tuesday. Their contract renewal, $4.7 million, the largest account in our firm's 30-year history, was due Thursday. Miss it, and the bank calls the line. The firm won't survive the next week. Ed had borrowed against that renewal 6 months ago. $800,000 credit line, secured quietly. No partnership vote, no mention to me. Our CFO pulled me aside 3 weeks earlier with numbers she didn't want to be holding. Ed needed that Thursday signature more than he'd ever admitted. What he didn't know was that I'd already met with the client, Saturday morning, breakfast at Brennan's on Smith Street, a place Ed would never think to check because Ed doesn't eat breakfast. 2 hours, 2 cups of coffee, a handshake in the parking lot. By the time I stepped out onto Travis Street on Tuesday, I already knew exactly where things stood. He'd spent 3 months telling clients I was slowing decisions, resisting growth, quietly engineering my exit. He never once asked what I'd been doing with my time. He thought I didn't know, that I'd just let him get away with it. He had no idea. 47 hours until Thursday, and by then, he'd learned what loyalty really cost. Ed had called me a liability in front of witnesses. That word had been sitting in my chest since Tuesday, like something swallowed wrong. Not the anger, the calculation. Because a man who says that out loud isn't just frustrated. He's already decided you're gone. He's already made his next move. I needed to know what that move was. Wednesday morning, desk by 6:30. The kind of quiet that only exists before the phones start. Ed's office light was already on. That was unusual. Ed didn't do early mornings. Hadn't in 15 years. I watched through the glass partition. He was on the phone, leaning forward the way he did when something was already decided, when showing up was just ceremony. He wasn't grinding. He wasn't worried. A man sitting on $800,000 of borrowed exposure, 40 hours from a deadline that could end everything. He should have been worried. He looked like a man holding a card he hadn't shown yet. That bothered me more than anything else that week. I went back to my desk and pulled up the internal file transfer logs. Our CFO had set up access for me quietly 3 weeks earlier, after hours. She'd been uncomfortable for months. Wouldn't say why until she was ready. I started with the 6 months before the credit line was arranged. 40 minutes. That's all it took. Ray Sobieski, the junior partner I'd brought into this firm, mentored from his first client call to his first solo close, had been copied on 11 internal emails between Ed and the bank. 11. Going back to March. Financial projections. A document titled Partner Capacity Assessment that used my name in ways I had never authorized. Ray had been in every one of those meetings, silent, taking notes on his yellow legal pad, the same way I'd taught him. I sat with that for a long moment. Then I realized Ed hadn't just been building a case against me. He'd been building it with someone I trusted, someone I'd built from scratch. Someone who knew exactly where every body was buried in this firm. I stood up, walked to the window. 38 hours until Thursday. Ed thought he'd covered every angle. He'd forgotten that I trained the man who handed him the shovel, and now he was about to dig his own hole. My partner had borrowed $800,000 against a contract he couldn't close without me. A man I'd mentored for 3 years had been feeding him ammunition, and Thursday was now less than 30 hours away. I'd been in bad positions before. This one smelled different. This one had been designed. I called Ray at 7:15 Wednesday morning. Didn't text, didn't email. Called. 3 rings. Then his voice. Careful, flat in a way it had never been with me before. Bobby. Just my name, nothing after it. That told me everything I needed to know about what he already knew I'd found. I kept it simple. Parking structure on Milam, level 2, 30 minutes. He paused, long enough that I counted it. Okay. He was already there when I arrived, leaning against his car with his arms crossed, his yellow legal pad tucked under one arm out of habit, even now. I'd bought him that first pad. Small thing. He'd used one ever since. I didn't waste time. How long has he been planning to push me out? Ray looked at the floor. Since February. 6 months. While I was closing the Granger deal that kept our margins intact. While I was covering 2 open accounts he'd let slide. February. Did you know about the credit line? Not until April. He finally looked up. By then, I was already in the emails. Bobby, I'm not here for that. I cut him off. Not angry, just focused. Is the Thursday meeting still on? Ray's jaw tightened. He shifted his weight. That pause. The same one he used to give me when a deal had complications he hadn't told me about yet. Ed called Jim Caldwell's office yesterday afternoon. Moved the contract review to tonight, 8 o'clock. He said you'd already agreed to the new time. I stood very still. Tonight. Not Thursday morning. Tonight. Ed had pulled the clock forward without telling me. He wasn't planning to close that contract with me in the room. He was planning to close me out of the firm before I ever got there. 22 hours had just become 4. Ed had moved the meeting to tonight, 8 o'clock. My name used to approve a time change I never agreed to. 30 years of equity in this firm, and he planned to sign it away before I walked through the door. 4 hours. That was all Ed had before his plan started falling apart. I sat in my car on level 2 of that parking structure for 6 minutes, not panicking, thinking. A man my age learns the difference between those two things, or he doesn't last. Ed's mistake wasn't moving the meeting. His mistake was assuming I'd find out too late to matter. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to a number I hadn't needed since Saturday. Jim Caldwell answered on the second ring. Jim, it's Bobby. I need 2 minutes. A pause, then, I've been wondering when you'd call. That was enough. He already knew something was wrong. Good men usually do. I didn't unload everything. Didn't need to. I told him Ed had moved the meeting without my knowledge. That I had documentation of a credit line secured against his contract without partnership authorization. That if he signed tonight with only Ed in that room, he'd be stepping into a legal dispute he didn't ask for. Jim went quiet. How long have you known about this, Bobby? Long enough to make sure you didn't walk into it blind. Another pause. Longer this time. I'll push the meeting to Thursday morning, 9 o'clock. Both of you in the room or I don't sign. I could have called our attorney first. Could have filed to freeze the credit line. Could have gone straight to the bank. Some people would say I should have. Instead, I'd made one phone call and handed Ed a Thursday he couldn't control. I knew what that decision meant. Whatever happened in that room on Thursday, it would be the last meeting Bobby Strickland and Ed Foss ever took together. One of us was walking out of that firm. There was no version of Thursday where we both stayed. I'd made my peace with that on level 2 of a parking structure on Milam Street. What I hadn't told Jim Caldwell, what Ed still didn't know, was what I'd been carrying in my briefcase since Monday morning. Every document, every email, every transfer log. 30 years of this firm, and I had all of it. 1 room, 2 men, and a $4.7 million contract sitting on the table between us like a grenade neither of us had pulled the pin on yet. Ed had rehearsed for a Thursday that looked very different from this one. He arrived 7 minutes late. Deliberate. Ed always used time as a signal. He walked in, saw me already seated across from Jim Caldwell, and stopped moving for just a moment. Half a second. Nobody else would have noticed. I noticed. He sat down, straightened his jacket, smiled the way he'd been smiling at deal tables for 30 years. Easy, practiced, built for rooms where he held the advantage. Bobby, he said, like we were still partners. Ed, I said, like we both knew we weren't. Jim Caldwell looked between us once. Then he set his pen down. Before we talk about the renewal, I want to understand the credit arrangement. The smile didn't leave Ed's face, but something behind it did. Standard operating procedure, he said smoothly. Bobby and I aligned on it months ago. I opened my briefcase, placed 3 documents on the table, side by side, clean, no drama. The bank correspondence, dated March, the partner capacity assessment, Ed's handwriting in the margin, and the email thread copied 11 times going back to February. Not once had my name appeared as a signatory. Not once had I been consulted. Ed looked at the documents. Then he looked at me. Then he did what I knew he would do, because Ed Foss had been talking his way out of rooms his entire career. Those emails are internal strategy documents, taken out of context. He turned to Jim, voice still steady. Bobby's been resistant to the firm's growth direction for over a year. This is why we've been restructuring decision-making authority. Jim Caldwell didn't react. He picked up the bank correspondence, read it slowly, line by line, set it back down. Ed. His voice was quiet, the way a man speaks when he's already decided. Your firm borrowed against my contract, without notifying me, without Bobby's signature. Is that correct? The smile was gone now. Ed opened his mouth once, then closed it, looked at the documents spread between us. 30 years of careful construction sitting on a conference table on a Thursday morning, and found nothing left to say. I'm going to need the room, Jim said. It wasn't a request. Ed stood, straightened his jacket one last time, the same habit, the same motion, and walked out of a room he'd spent 6 months trying to take from me. I watched him go. No satisfaction in it, not the way I expected. Just the particular weight of something that has finally finished. Jim signed the renewal 40 minutes later. $4.7 million. 30-year relationship intact. By Friday morning, our firm's attorneys had begun dissolving the partnership. Ed's equity, what remained after the credit line was settled, went with him. I kept the firm, the name, the accounts, everything we'd built. I didn't call anyone to tell them, didn't need to. I drove back down Travis Street that Thursday afternoon with the windows down, September heat finally starting to break. A man who calls you a liability in front of witnesses has already told you everything you need to know about how the story ends. He just assumed he'd be the one telling it.